Well, veterans advocates are calling for improvements to the Department of Veterans Affairs following a roundtable hosted by the department's secretary in Canberra. Joining us now is Glenn Kolomeitz, the veterans advocate and former CEO of RSL New South Wales. Glenn, good morning to you. Thanks very much for joining us. So just take us to that meeting. So first of all, what issues did you raise?
A whole lot of issues falling out of recent media reporting. So that's why the media reporting was so important. It allowed us to focus the issues and get on with a really good meeting on Friday. Things like a lack of access to psychiatrists, DVA not paying the bills for psychiatric reports, the legal issue, lawyers fighting veterans at taxpayers' expense, the funding of lay advocates and the support of lay advocates appearing for veterans, just the general time to process claims, the whole gamut of issues, but a very focused meeting.
Did you sort out some of the super issues that have been persistent in the last 3 years? Also, claims to compensation. Did you feel like you finally had a sympathetic ear?
Absolutely. This is, just to use an army term, I saw a real bias to action on the part of the department, which I hadn't seen before, and I certainly hadn't seen under the former secretary. So Liz Cosson, former General Cosson, I think has brought that real bias to action to bear. And I'm not one to compliment DVA, as you know. I've been quite critical in the past, so it lends weight to what I'm saying now, that she and her staff really took on board what we had to say. They were very candid in the errors of the past and the present, and they showed a real way ahead for the department. They're putting veterans back in Veterans Affairs, I believe.
Which issues did they seem most receptive to?
Yeah, I raised a couple of the what I thought were the big ticket items. The fact that for some time now psychiatrists have been loath to take on veteran patients, and I found out that a lot of that was down to the fact that DVA was paying psychiatrists less than most other government arrangements, less than the NDIS and certainly less than the AMA market rates. And that DVA was late paying psychiatrists' bills, preparing reports for DVA. So they're rectifying both of those issues. Things like the legal expenses. They're now reassessing their policies about having top-tier law firms appearing against unrepresented veterans. I said that should never happen, and the department tended to agree with that. So that was good. Yeah.
What about these calls for a Royal Commission into veteran suicide? Was any of that discussed?
It absolutely was, and the key to this is a round table of independent advocates. So some very, very talented people there speaking directly with the secretary, providing this frank and fearless advice, which she wants and needs. And we all discussed the Royal Commission issue. I think we're more looking at a Royal Commission into defence abuse and veteran suicide with some link into DVA's processes, rather than looking at a Royal Commission into DVA, which none of us really believe would achieve much.
Glenn, we had a story that was on our yesterday's show, an announcement by the government to spend millions of dollars on on new equipment, protective equipment, drones, whatnot, all kinds of stuff that our troops need. Just to take an alternative opinion, for someone who's trying to fight for extra money for our vets, is that a frustration for you to see all this money spent over here when it should be spent over here?
I had the absolute pleasure of deploying on 2 rotations with our special forces. These guys are just magic.
Yeah.
Just magic. We can't not spend money on their operations, on their equipment and their capability. It's a capability we must put money into. But there are other areas we're putting money into which we shouldn't be. We should be diverting back to looking after our people when they come home. Some of the other capital equipment we've brought over the years, some of the ships, some of the aircraft, just nonsense. Spending money on a lot of inquiries and projects that really should have been diverted back into looking after our people on their return home.
Can I ask you what a difference in the Minister in charge of Veterans Affairs actually makes? Because in the past we've had those with a military background where some of the worst things seem to have happened within the department. So does that make a difference, or is this all driven by the department?
Look, I think a lot of it comes down to leadership at the secretary level. The minister, of course, the doctrine of ministerial accountability is ultimately accountable, but a lot of it turns on the leadership of the secretary, in this case Liz Cosson, who I think is an exceptional leader. So as much as I've spoken to the minister a few times, Darren Chester, and I think he's a pretty effective minister, it comes down to the secretary, and I think she's really getting on with the job.
Well, it sounds like you're making some headway. You've been on our show a couple of times. You've been, I don't want to say negative, but you've sort of been under a bit more pressure to get something done, and it looks like you're getting somewhere.
Absolutely right. And this, as I said earlier, this is where the media comes into play, using the media as an accountability tool to focus the issues, narrow the issues, and to get some attention. So it's been great. And Sky, your program opened some doors, I have to say.
Yeah. Well, we're happy to keep having you on. Keep us updated, Glenn. Yeah,
That's great.
It. Thanks very much for coming in, mate. Appreciate
Thanks, guys.
Work's
Cheers.
not done, so
Yep, that's right.
Long way to go.
keep on at it.